Alrighty, should we jump into it?
Sure.
Go for it.
So we are back with an awesome episode for you guys today. We have an incredible guest on the podcast, and in doing some preparation for this, my mind was completely blown. So, Josh, I want to welcome you to Measure What, and I would love for you to give us your story and your Bitcoin journey because it is one for the ages. It's incredible.
Thank you. Yeah, I go by Josh and Secure Sovereign on X. I created that account a year ago when I went public after recovering a life-changing amount of Bitcoin that I had left in my shed on a hard drive since 2010. And basically I forgot about it. And then in late 23, my life fell apart. Um, lose my job, mom gets sick, girlfriend leaves me, grandpa dies all around the same time, and it was not a good time. Um, but I the silver lining was that my grandpa left me a little bit of money, so I thought I should do something with this money, and then I thought, well, maybe I should get some Bitcoin, and then that's when I remembered I already had done that, and then basically began on a path where I went to the shed, found the Bitcoin, found somebody to help me recover it, and now I'm pivoting into the industry and trying to you know apply myself in hopefully helpful ways.
I mean that it's just an unbelievable story that if you just start thinking about it. So let's unpack that for a little bit. I'm super excited to hear more details on that. Take us back to you said it was in 2010 when you first started playing with Bitcoin.
Yeah, I basically what happened was I was learning about Linux because I am a web developer, and most websites then and now are deployed on Linux. So I thought to myself, well, I can't rightly claim to be a web developer if I don't actually know how to use Linux. So I went ahead and installed it, got a computer, installed it, messed around with it for a little while. Very quickly realized that there's not much to do on Linux. That's true now and was especially true back then. So I did a quick Google search. Literally the search was, what do I do with my Linux? And because Pizza Day had just happened, it so happened that it saturated search results and the news, and it came up, well, you could put Bitcoin on your Linux. So that's what I did. I understood that it was a novel technology and that it created a digital asset that uh, could not be copied, only transferred, which was novel. I understood it was novel, but I didn't, at the time, I certainly didn't understand like the scope or the breadth of what had happened. I just thought it was cool and then like messed around with it for a very short period of time. Then uh, kind of just forgot about it, disassembled the computer, took the hard drive out, put it in a box of other, with a bunch of other hard drives, and then, it sat in my shed for forever, basically.
And so you were
Yeah.
one of the original hodlers, a 15 or 13-year hodler. So you mentioned that this digital scarcity thing was novel. It obviously didn't kind of hit you in the sense that this is earth changing.
No, I was politically awake and aware back then, so I understood that, what was happening in a sense is at the time, there was a lot of response to 2008 and the financial crisis.
Right.
And, the Tea Party was founded and the Fed was published and Bitcoin all happened around the same time. And it was clear to me like that was all in response to the same thing. It didn't necessarily mean to me that therefore they had fixed money. Like that
Right.
part didn't connect. So
Yeah. Interesting. And so when you bought the Bitcoin at that stage, what was it for? Just to kind of like be part of this, brand new kind of cypherpunk movement?
um I think at that point, I just I thought it was a neat little thing that I could collect, and like Satoshi even said, I think at one point, like just get some and maybe it'll take off or something like that. I don't remember exactly what he said, but
Yeah.
um, and yeah, that's effectively what my position was. Um, and I didn't really think about it, and in a way, I'm glad I didn't because if when I was in my early 20s, my time preferences were very different than they are today. So if I had really identified as a Bitcoiner and understood what I had and what I was gaining and what I was losing because of
Sure.
the price action, then I may have sold, so
Yeah.
who knows what would have happened, but I'm a very different person now than I was then.
Absolutely. I'm sure we're going to get into that now. But I mean, just to at early 20s to be thinking like that, as you said, kind of like politically awake and understanding what's going on. That's a testament to you. You know, without the 13 years of hodling, not too many kids your age or at that age were probably thinking like that. So fast forward a sense. So 13 years, nothing really happened in terms of you didn't even think about the Bitcoin once, and you completely forgot about it the whole time.
I was always and I always have been a newsie, so I would pay attention to the news, and I remember hearing about things happening in Bitcoin space. So I remember hearing about the block size wars. I remember hearing about Michael Saylor, and some of the memes sometimes would penetrate into the general like internet digital media space. And I did follow a lot of like alternative media people, but they weren't talking about Bitcoin much.
And so
So
it never even clicked once, like, even if you saw Bitcoin headline or, ticker price, like, oh, I've got some of that.
no,
Not once.
no, no. So what happened was is my whole life fell apart. And then because my life fell apart, I was desperate. Before I wasn't like well off. I was, you know, poor basically, and I guess but I had enough that I was able to coast along without like worrying too much.
Hmm.
And then when my life really went to shit, then I was like, okay, I need to figure out something. And it just so happened there was a bunch of Bitcoin in my shed.
Unreal. So you said that your grandfather passed away and he left you a little bit of money, and you decided to put the proceeds from that into Bitcoin at that
Yes,
stage.
that
So now
was
we kind of fast forwarding
100%
13
accurate.
years.
Yes, that's
Okay.
right. When the group Nova Sapien at novasapien.com helped me recover the Bitcoin,
Hmm.
they orange pilled me, and by the end of that week or two long process, I was pretty heavily inundated with the whole Bitcoiner ethos. I've strayed a little bit from my piety recently, but but I'm still a maximalist, still fully allocated, and I do believe Bitcoin is better.
So take us back to the moment where you had the kind of quote unquote penny drop moment where your life is in a shambles, and you suddenly remember that you have some Bitcoin on a hard drive somewhere.
Yeah, so what happened is I did due diligence on investments for a really long time after my grandpa died, trying to figure out what to do with this little bit of money that he left me,
Hmm.
and everything in the market looked like garbage because it is.
Yeah.
And then I thought I don't know. I don't know why I thought it, but I thought maybe I should get some Bitcoin. And then almost in that moment, I remember the hard drive, and I'm like, wait a second, I already did this, but there's no way. There's absolutely no way. I'm not that lucky. This is not my life. Even if I do find that drive, it's going to be corrupted. It'll be broken somehow. It'll be encrypted with like the best encryption in the universe or something. So I was not in a hopeful aspirational state at that point. But
I
I
mean,
was
I
like,
was listening to your story, and that at that point, my hands started sweating. I was like, you basically like getting teased with winning the lottery, but you have to like jump through all these hoops to potentially maybe get it. It must have been like a roller coaster of emotions.
yes, yes, it was certainly there was a lot going on, especially also with my mom sick. I because of the nature of her illness, I basically had to take care of her every day.
Right.
So I didn't have time to really think about myself.
Hmm.
And that was a big part of the problem as well.
Yeah, I thought it was first off when you and I met almost a year ago now, little under a year. But when we first really started talking, I'm gonna go back to when you were talking about being more or less politically awake at 24. I was very captivated when you and I started talking. Obviously, we're at a Bitcoin meetup when we met, but you were sitting there talking about, oh, this is where I was when I was 24 in this time period of. I was like, oh wow. Me, I was sitting there. I was like, I don't remember any of this happening. I was in elementary school, but regardless, sitting there listening to you talk about all of the happenings that I am now looking back on when it comes to what was happening in 2008, what the aftermath effects of that were. It was just very fun to listen to somebody who was more or less in the state that I would say all three of us are when it comes to really observing the world around us, but being, again, same hopes and aspirations at 24. But again, looking back at the time that you were around, it was pretty inspiring. And then obviously on top of that, the dead man portfolio theory of sit it and forget it all obviously played out. So it's been really fun to get to know you, and it's also been really fun to see your passion for the community that more or less saved you in a way.
That's exactly what happened. I have gone through personally a transformation. I would say, I don't want to like lord the time that I've been in Bitcoin over people too much. I think about how I was in my early 20s and all of the anxiety I had about myself and my life and who I was going to be and how I was going to be. And, if I had been smarter, I'd probably have more Bitcoin, like no matter how good you are, there's someone who is better and smarter.
Yeah.
So, and I guess I kind of got lucky in that the drive didn't fail and a lot of things sort of aligned in a particular way for me that um were sort of miraculous, but nonetheless, I would say it's also, in my case, I was pretty fairly demoralized for a pretty long time, paying attention to a lot of this stuff in the alternative media. There is a lot of stuff out there that I would consider to be truth and worth learning, but a lot of that truth is shrouded in mystery and I don't know, disinformation, misinformation, lies, deceit.
Propaganda.
So it's like,
Propaganda.
yeah, it's hard to untangle it all, and a lot of it is actually designed deliberately to demoralize you. And so when you're in your early 20s and you're confronted with the um I don't know, the most sophisticated, most expensive propaganda machine ever to exist, you know, that's pretty hard to defend against psychologically. And I am not going to say I was entirely successful in that regard. But I knew enough to be skeptical. I knew enough to think this system, whatever is going on, is bad and not working for me. And maybe this Bitcoin thing might work out. I didn't necessarily know it would, but I knew whatever was going on over here was certainly not going to.
Right. And so talk me through, you find the hard drive. You obviously you got someone's help to, you know, get to the Bitcoin. I believe you flew out to Colorado for that. What was
Yeah.
the plane? What was the plane ride coming back like when you secured your Bitcoin?
Um, it was a mix of like elation and immense sadness. Honestly, I didn't really believe what had happened, and it took some time to process it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I felt a lot of resentment to the people who didn't stick around. And in a way, I guess the better way of putting that is to like say, I remember who was there for me when I was at my lowest,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it was me.
Really.
So and I think that was a lesson that was hard won for me.
I mean, well, props to you. That's testament to your character. Going through that tough time. You obviously haven't gone too deep into that, but I'm sure just with what you shared, it was awful. Um, so it's almost like you had like a cosmic event that got you back on track through
It
Bitcoin.
sometimes makes me question.
Yeah, I'm sure it must have. I mean, I can only imagine that. I'm just trying to put myself in your shoes, flying back on that plane with a hard drive or whatever you had, with as you said, a life changing amount of Bitcoin. Um,
Right. Well, fortunately, the company that I found to help me recover the Bitcoin didn't just leave me hanging. They gave me a week-long workshop on how to properly do self-custody,
right.
so I could rest easy at night, knowing that I wouldn't be in the position where I'm almost losing my Bitcoin or losing my Bitcoin again.
Yeah.
And I felt secure enough about that I immediately went public as well as a
Really.
Bitcoiner and as an OG. And now I'm throwing my hat into the ring for a number of politically contentious things, but trying to be, as technically fair-minded as I can be.
That's awesome. I mean, your life literally turned around basically overnight. I mean, it must have been a phenomenal ride.
Yeah, I've met a lot of very incredible people in the last year, and I'm hoping that I can do some good for Bitcoin and for the community. I'm out here trying to promote Bitcoin itself and drive adoption and promote self custody and better forms of self custody and even making Bitcoin itself more resilient. So that's really what I'm trying to do. I mean, once I became fully allocated to it, I decided that it was time to figure it out as much as I could figure it out, and so
Right, right.
that's what I'm doing.
I think it's a great testament to Bitcoin as itself. It's not just number go up technology. There's an incredible community. Yeah, we obviously have some bad actors that are playing on the fringes, but for the most part, I can say, and I'm sure Justin, you can jump in on this as well, as people that grok Bitcoin and understand, the whole philosophy and the thesis behind it. I've met have been incredible, and for the guy to help you out to try and secure that Bitcoin, and then give you a week long course on self custody. That's just it's an awesome community, I think.
Oh yeah, no. Well, he orange pilled me. Yeah, Nova Sapien and Josh Groth over at Nova Sapien did incredible work for me. Hunter, who was on the team who helped me recover the Bitcoin, he's the author of BIP 360. He goes by Hunter Beast.
Okay.
BIP 360 is a proposal to make Bitcoin quantum resistant. And he's also the CTO of a team called BitVault. And they are developing a multi-sig only um, software wallet with time delays and duress codes and various other security features to help mitigate the wrench attack in particular, which is something that as a Bitcoiner and OG who went public, I have to,
Be aware of, yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's something.
Well, I can definitely speak to the idea of, again, Bitcoin, and once you really grasp it, does throw you in a direction where you're like, okay, I need to focus my time and energy on this to help others. And I can truly say that you have been an inspiration over the last year for me, especially seeing how your story evolved, what it has ultimately led to. So I just, again, I you are truly one of a kind in that light, and I just really wanted to say thank you because you have taught me a lot. And also in this, you, like, again, I don't know how many people would continue down the path that you have gone down. Again, I just want to give you props there. If I had showed up and found a hard drive full of Bitcoin in my shed, I don't know what I would be doing right now. And so just the understanding and knowledge that you have of multiple different fields has been awesome to listen to. And I just wanted to, again, just say,
I appreciate
give you my
that.
props and thanks there.
No, thank you. Thank you. I think when, fundamentally, when you have an understanding of something that is important as Bitcoin is, you have an obligation, an intellectual obligation to share that knowledge. So, it wouldn't feel right to run off to, some South American country and live on pupusas for the rest of my life, which I could very well do, but there's good work left to be done in Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is the best, most pristine asset that exists, but that doesn't mean that it's perfect. So I'm trying to think about that and develop solutions to make Bitcoin more resilient and make self-custody easier. And that's another thing too. I look at self-custody is somewhat difficult now, and if the UX was better, then maybe we could onboard more people into self-custody. And there's a lot of great people working on that and in this space right now, and I'm trying to apply myself as well to that.
Yeah. Before we get into that, because that is a big part of what I would like to cover today.
Sure.
Take me back to the week-long course where you said they orange pilled you. Most people
Yeah.
don't get orange pilled in 1 week. It's a process. I mean, I know for certain I didn't take 1 week. It took some time. What were some of the key themes that kind of jumped out at you that were able to compress that time for you to, quote unquote, become orange pilled in such a short time?
Well, having done the 7 months of due diligence on all of the other major asset classes prior helped.
Mm-hmm.
So realizing, just looking at number go up itself was, I was like, just had 20 million% gains. I was like, what else is going to give me 20 million% gains? And then I was like, nothing. Like, there's nothing else out there that can get me anywhere close to this.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, what's the risk, right? And the risk is essentially don't like buy it unless you intend to hold it for at least 4 years. But if you do that and you can hold on to it, you don't need to spend it, then there's no better savings technology on planet Earth. So, and I'm like a living testament to that. And it was in fact because I came home to my family with 20 million% gains that they started to pay attention to the things that I was saying, and it makes sense though too. Like, if a guy who's overweight tries to sell you a diet book, then why would you pay attention to that?
Right. Yeah.
So why are they going to pay attention to me until I come home with 20 million% gains? And suddenly I'm able to orange pill people that who would before not be like susceptible to the argument.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome.
Can you kind of break down? I know that in your first little period over this last year, you've been doing a lot of work with Seed Signer and Nova Sapien for the most part. Can you kind of break that down and kind of, you started elaborating on what you were doing when I first met you, and I was very confused on the topic at first. So can you kind of break down kind of the different options in self-custody, mostly just focusing on Seed Signer versus some of the other
I like Seed Signer the best because it, I think, has the best security model of all of the current options. And in order to use it, in order to do self-custody with it, you really have to understand the fundamentals of what you're doing. And that I like because it's not abstracting away any of the complexity. It is putting it right in your face. So you don't get the luxury of relying on someone else to handle it for you. And that, I think, is really the fundamental value of Bitcoin and self-custody, is that you take sovereignty over it in every way. So the Seed Signer allows you to do that. The nice thing about it is that it's completely air gapped. So it's got an SD card that you load the OS onto, so it's not built-in firmware. The hardware is standard Raspberry Pi for hardware. So basically, you can validate all of the circuits on the Raspberry Pi yourself to make sure it hasn't been tampered with, because this is your key signing device. And then it has no Wi-Fi, it has no Bluetooth, it has no ability to store information except in volatile memory, which is wiped when you unplug it from the power. So it stores your keys temporarily, but when you unplug it, it wipes the keys, basically. It's called ephemeral key management. And so instead of holding the keys on the device, you instead hold your keys on steel plates or on cards, which you distribute geographically. And essentially, that is, I would say, it's the best way of doing it. And the nice thing about Nova Sapien is they have kits that they sell there that give you everything that you would need to do self-custody with the seed signer and do it consistently with all the materials. And it comes with like a battery, it comes with the SD card, it comes with tamper-evident bags. You can also get fire-resistant bags and lockable gun cases off their website, and basically just everything that you need to do it, and a standard methodology to do it. So I really like Seed Signer, and I really like Nova Sapien because I think they make self-custody as accessible as it can be, and that's important.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hope that answer your question.
No, it did, absolutely. It's just again, for someone who, again, I have no source, no sense of in any web development or any coding background or any hardware background or anything like that. So at the beginning of this, when I was like, okay, all these people are talking about self custody, understanding what it is, taking hold of your private keys that allow you to access your Bitcoin on the Bitcoin blockchain. Ultimately, after that, for me, I was like, okay, how do I even start here? So again, progressing through my time, you quickly realize how efficient and first principles based Seed Signer is as a whole. Completely open source software, completely open source hardware as well. So again, it's an awesome tool that plebs and quite literally anybody can use very efficiently. It looks daunting at first, but I promise you, it's not. And it's, again, just a lot of great work there. Anything else you want to cover on that front?
No, I mean, there are a lot of great options out there. I do think there is an argument to be made that, some of the easier options like seedless self-custody might make more sense for some people. But if you're talking about any significant amount of Bitcoin, then I think doing proper self-custody is the way to do it.
Yeah, I think once you've put in the time to understand the global monetary system and that nothing's going to, give you gains like Bitcoin is comparatively, and you do then decide to allocate heavily, it's part and parcel that you have to then understand self-custody, because you can't let that amount of money, be in someone else's hands. I think that's
right.
a core.
Self-custody is the main value proposition of Bitcoin. If it weren't for self-custody, Bitcoin wouldn't have the value that it does. And if we could rely on third parties, we wouldn't need Bitcoin.
Exactly. It's the trust part. The self-custody cuts out the trust. You can trust yourself. That's it. I think it's fascinating. What's that? Go ahead.
I was just going to say I have to credit Josh Groth with that one. That's the first time I heard that saying. If we could trust third parties, we wouldn't need Bitcoin. Sorry.
I love all these Bitcoinisms. I mean, Jeff Booth's got that great one. If it can say decentralized and secure, and Parker Lewis, he says if you can credibly, show that it's got a limited supply of 21 million coins. But the self-custody, all these pieces all fit together, and it's a fascinating learning journey to go on.
100%.
Don't have to worry about code not working in the way that it should. But humans, many times over throughout history, have shown that they work in ways that they probably shouldn't. So,
Yeah.
um, kind of moving into the next part. Obviously, wanted to talk a lot about what you are currently doing, where you are doing this out of, kind of that move. I know that you recently moved. I think it was at the tail end of the summer, right? Somewhere around there. Just
Yep.
wanted to kind of talk through that part and where you're currently located.
Sure. So I am a Virginia native, and when Strategy announced they were launching a free co-working space out of their headquarters in Northern Virginia, I immediately jumped on the opportunity, applied, told them my story. They accepted me, and so I moved up here, and now I work out of this co-working space with 25 other Bitcoin entrepreneurs. It's a Bitcoin-only space, and we're adjacent to Strategy, and we talk about Bitcoin with them, and they educate us, we educate them.
That's so cool. That must be one of the best working environments you could create.
It is actually really great here. I have made a lot of great connections in the space, a lot of very smart people. Um, the head of the DC Bitcoiner group is here, and they just achieved nonprofit status, which was a big milestone for them. I donated to their. They just launched a donation campaign as well. I'll send you the link for that after the call if you want. You can put that in the description.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
But yeah,
the guys in DC and the gals in DC are working very hard on creating this community, and kind of they're focusing really hard, I know, on kind of creating a Bitcoin circular economy for a lot of smaller businesses in the area. So again, the testament to the DC Bitcoin group, definitely doing some great work up there. So
100%.
anything else you wanted to cover, Justin, before we get into what Josh is currently up to?
No, go ahead. This is going to get super technical, so hopefully I can keep up, but excited to learn.
This is very technical, but I don't know if I would trust anybody else with
I'll
explaining
try
this
and keep it
issue.
general.
Yeah, yeah. We'll try to keep it layman's terms for everybody. But
Okay.
Josh is
All
working
right.
on something fun, kind of how to merge the governance issue in Bitcoin.
Yes. So effectively, what happened was I recovered all this corn, and then I thought, okay, I've been out of the game for a while. What happened? Like, what's been going on? I kind of got some, like we were talking about before, I got some words here and there. I kind of knew the history a little bit, but I didn't really understand the block size wars and what was going on then. So I found a talk by Gavin Andreessen in 2014 at Princeton, where he was talking about increasing the block size limit to 1 MB. And then he also made some, I would say, pointed comments in that talk where he talks about how he thought that there should be 3, 4, or 5 alternative Bitcoin implementations in 6 months. And that he pointedly said that basically, I think 5 or 6 people were in control of, at the time, what was $6 billion worth of market cap in Bitcoin. And and I think it also should be pointed out that he stepped down as lead maintainer within 2 weeks of making that speech.
Hmm.
And then, of course, the block size wars happened. And then the whole Craig Wright thing happened. And then he was thrown out unsummarily. And so it looked pretty bad. Honestly, I was like, okay, this is not good. And then and I talked to a lot of people, a lot of Bitcoiners who were around even then, and the general message I got from people was, we don't want to talk about it. And some people were quite upfront. A lot of people actually are quite upfront. They're like, we have PTSD from this particular time period in Bitcoin history, It was very bad, and we don't want to talk about it. And anybody who tries to bring up governance is, siding with the big blockers or whatever, and
Hmm.
and that's not really what I'm saying. I actually don't have any particular like prescription for Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin is itself fine, technically bulletproof. I'm not saying we need to like do this consensus change or that consensus change. My issue isn't with the technical consensus layer. My issue is with the social consensus layer, which essentially I see as needlessly chaotic. There's essentially the way the system is set up, it's all or nothing. So if you have even a minor disagreement about anything in any part of the system, the only resolution is civil war in some cases. And that has happened multiple times in Bitcoin's history. The block size wars is only one of those instances. And my contention is that we could perhaps develop a better way to resolve disputes in Bitcoin without massive, drama fueled, civil wars and I don't know how to even best describe what's going on. It's like a religious crusade,
Yeah.
and with a lot of propaganda and rhetoric that is inappropriate, unfair, especially to Core, but also to Luke. And so, I'm trying to be as objective as I can be.
If you don't mind, let's take a step back. Let's kind of
Sure.
deviate the difference between consensus and governance, the technical consensus and the what you call social consensus as well.
Sure. So the technical consensus is what is written into the code, and so you have C++ code at the base layer of Bitcoin, and it's for 350, 400,000 lines of code. And consensus is embedded in those lines of code. And so if you want to reliably make changes to consensus or any of that code adjacent to consensus, then you need to be a master of 8 disciplines, basically. And so I'm basically am arguing that there isn't anybody on planet Earth who is the sufficient polymath to reliably make those changes. And so the argument is, well, we rely on peer review, right? And we have other people looking at the code, but that doesn't always work. In fact, bugs have gotten into the code. There was the inflation bug that sat there for quite some time. Peer review is not perfect. Peer review is only as good as the people reviewing it. And if you need to be a master of 8 disciplines in order to reliably review it, much less do anything about it, then that, I think, makes it, it makes the barrier of entry very, very high, which as a result means when Bitcoin does get new contributors, they don't stick around for very long and most of their contributions are rejected, which you could argue is good in many cases, but in other cases, not so much. There's a lot of things I would argue that Bitcoin should do that don't have anything to do with the technical consensus layer that it doesn't do right now. Like, for example, it could have better peer-to-peer networking, or it could do something called UTXO commitments, and UTXO commitments don't require a fork at all, and they're not controversial, and they would decrease the initial blockchain download from 700 gigs to 15 gigs. Like there's a lot of stuff that could be happening right now that isn't happening. And the general argument from Core is, well, it's ossification. But my position is that it's actually paralysis masquerading as ossification. But that's a separate discussion.
Can you go back to that UTXO and explain that, how that works?
So my understanding is that if you combine UTXO commitments with peer consensus, then you can reduce the initial blockchain download by a significant amount. Now, you would still need archival nodes, and you would still need people who are downloading the full blockchain, but it would open up much a whole new class of hardware. Like much smaller devices could run nodes now that can't because of the storage requirements.
And they would be full nodes, or?
Well, they would be full nodes, and they would still be cryptographically verifying the UTXO set, but they would only be verifying a subset of the tail end of the UTXO set, not the whole thing. So currently, the way Bitcoin works is that it downloads the entire blockchain, and then with pruning and filters, disposes of the blocks that it's not interested in, right? But with UTXO commitments, you don't even have to download the whole blockchain to dispose of it. So it saves on a lot of bandwidth, essentially. And then with the same methodology, you can reduce the amount of ongoing spam per block going over your node by 40 to 60%, I would argue. So it helps with spam. It helps with the whole like initial blockchain issue. And then, that it resolves there's a lot of like things that could be happening, like I said, that aren't.
And for people that are kind of, surface level understanding of this, how that helps is when the node doesn't have to download the entire blockchain, it's a smaller amount of data that is required, and therefore it's easier for more people to run these nodes, which in turn, equates to more decentralization of nodes on the network.
100%. That's exactly right.
Yeah, it's an ongoing battle. One of the two things that really hit me when I was going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole and my limited understanding of computer science, but I understood Moore's law and I understood the difficulty adjustment right thereafter. But speaking to that, again, as time goes on, in theory, it should be easier and easier and easier, even with these pruning capabilities of the blockchain and the UTXO sets there. Again, in theory, we should be getting down to a space where nodes are going to be even more efficient to run in terms of storage capabilities going forward, which is a fun thought process there.
Right. And also by advancing, there's a lot of, I would say there's a lot of advancements that have occurred in the last 15 years that Bitcoin is currently not taking advantage of.
You want to give us some examples of what those could be?
Well, yeah, in the Rust ecosystem, there's something called IRO and Quick, which would improve the peer-to-peer networking capabilities of Bitcoin dramatically and make it a lot more resilient. It would actually probably decrease networking costs. Like there's all sorts of examples. I'm trying to think of some others, but nonetheless, the main thing I think is the governance crisis is not being addressed because of the prior trauma of the block size wars.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually even got Adam back on record on Twitter about it, and he said he did exactly what I just said. He said that that I should be lucky. We should be lucky. Feel lucky that the Bitcoin block size wars resulted in core winning, because then we would have big blocks. And I'm just like, I'm not even talking about that at all. I'm not talking about the block size wars. I'm talking about how there's a governance discussion underneath the block size wars that people don't want to talk about. And Mike Hearn wrote an article where he famously declared Bitcoin dead. And in that article, that is essentially what he was talking about, was this governance issue. That the reason why he failed and where he went wrong is that he came from a corporate background, and the hierarchies and the governance solutions that he was presenting were from that frame of mind. They were from that top-down hierarchical frame of mind. And so they failed, and rightfully failed. And that's okay. I'm not suggesting that they should have succeeded, or that big blockers should have even won the block size wars. I'm not even suggesting that at all. I'm just saying we have no way of resolving disputes right now, aside from civil war, essentially. And there are multiple examples of advancements in programming and systems and development that Bitcoin could take advantage of, that it's not, because it's paralyzed, because the governance is paralyzed and has been for quite some time. So essentially, I'm not seeing any good answers from either side, Bitcoin Core or NOTs. The Lib Bitcoin people are doing good work. There are people doing good work and thinking about this issue. But so far, I think I'm the only one who's presented a sort of cohesive argument about what the issue really is, disentangling it from the block size wars, and also presenting a solution for how to resolve the political disputes in Bitcoin and balance the powers, the users, the miners, and the developers forever. So we don't have to have civil wars, and we can all, choose how we want to run Bitcoin without all this drama.
You want to give us like a 30,000 feet framework of how what that looks like?
Sure. Well, I'll just start with how I started working on it. I looked at the very thing we talked about earlier. I said, well, we've got 400,000 lines of code in C++ and Core, and consensus is embedded in that code. But at the base of everything, at the base of consensus, is math. So I plugged in Core's code to an AI, and I said to the AI, please extract from this code mathematical consensus. And it generated for me a mathematical proof of consensus, something that would have been not impossible, but very expensive to do before AI.
Mm-hmm.
And so essentially, by providing a mathematical proof of consensus, I am opening up consensus to 200 million mathematicians worldwide. So instead of needing someone who understands math and understands C++ and understands cryptography and economics and all this stuff, we can just have people who understand one or two of these things and get more eyes on the problem. Okay. And the whole thing with open source and Linus's law is that the security of open source software derives from the amount of eyes on the problem. But if you need very specialized eyes, then that becomes a problem in and of itself. So by creating a math proof, we now allow math people to worry about the math side of it. So that is in and of itself an innovation, and will allow me and the people who work with me on Commons to keep track of what Core is doing and actually pay very close attention to how they change consensus from a mathematical perspective. But I didn't stop there. What I did then is I created a consensus proof application that is built using the mathematical proof as the specification. So I didn't fork Core. I didn't rely on Core's code. I created a math proof of consensus and then built a separate stack on top of that math proof. So essentially this consensus proof is consensus, but it's actually locked to the math proof. So the consensus proof is locked to the math proof, algorithmically speaking, meaning that any change to the math proof or to the consensus proof have to match. And if they don't match, it's immediately evident that they don't match. So I've introduced basically something called formal verification. And so I can mathematically verify consensus. And anytime anybody makes any change to Bitcoin or even to my our particular node, we can map out exactly how that change affects consensus with a great degree of granularity. So we'll know if something breaks consensus 8 different ways,
Mm-hmm.
while core needs a polymath to figure it out. So essentially, I think it's a novel innovation, and we'll see how it bears out. So I built a full node on top of the consensus proof and optimized it. And so if if any changes occur at consensus level, the rest of the stack is actually downstream from the consensus proof, meaning that those changes would be immediately reflected throughout the rest of the stack. So I'm just trying to figure out the best way to put this, but essentially breaking consensus with this stack is basically really difficult. And the whole point of the stack was to formalize consensus to a great extent, because I knew that if I forked Bitcoin or tried to come up with my own Bitcoin node, the first question I'm going to get is it consensus valid? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that should be the first question, because if it's not consensus valid, then it's not Bitcoin. Right. So essentially the question is this really Bitcoin? And so, the answer to that is I'm able to prove it's Bitcoin even more than Core is able to prove that Core is Bitcoin. But at any rate,
That's
so
fascinating.
it's an interesting development. We'll see how it plays out. It could all be a giant hallucination, but all the code is up and the book is about to be published, and we'll see what happens.
That's awesome. That's very cool. So that's what you're spending the most of your time focusing on right now?
Right. So essentially, I looked at this whole Core v Knots thing, and I've just gotten really frustrated with the whole debate. It looked to me like a false dichotomy, because Knots is 98% the same code as Core.
Right.
And basically just like Luke flavored Core. And to see the level of rhetoric and propaganda that's being spewed from both sides when you have a 98% code similarity, to me is pretty scary, actually. This is what we're fighting.
I'd even go so far as to say, that sounds like, American politics almost. Maybe not 98%, but we're pretty much all on the same side, but we just don't know what flavor we like.
Exactly. So I'm genuinely trying to provide people with an alternative third way, and do so in such a way that resolves the immediate concern that people are going to have, which is this consensus valid? Is this Bitcoin? But also provide a commons governance system on top of that, which allows for the governance of Bitcoin to scale beyond just 6 people or however many people are currently in control of it, and eliminates the ability for any single person to press the button without everyone agreeing. Because right now, somebody could go into the GitHub and press the merge code button. Now, there would be consequences, and it would be reverted probably. But the fact that it's optional, the fact that anyone can go in there and do that, to me, is not good. And especially now going into an age of robots and AI, where the threat space is going to just get more sophisticated and more complex. I think we need Bitcoin that it will be more resilient in the face of the new threat space.
Yeah, I think it's very well. First off, back to your point of what we're currently seeing happen on X and that whole debate again, is I think the Bitcoin community might be a little weary of charged rhetoric. We kind of came from a world where we kind of saw that, like, okay, these people are going at each other, but in reality, kind of the same team here. Same concept there, but it does kind of in a sense with, again, not understanding how the steps work in the way of changing consensus or attempting to change consensus, that is. Can you kind of walk us through what it kind of looks like from A to B, talking about BIPs all the way through GitHub, through what core looks at, how many people are in core, what that whole A to Z process looks like in order to either end up with either a soft fork or hard fork, and also explaining those two there for any changes to Bitcoin. Because again, a lot of people from a base layer understanding
Yeah.
are like, okay, this is
Well,
unchangeable. But
Bitcoin is basically similar to every other open source project, except most open source projects at Bitcoin scale have formal governance. So Bitcoin is unique in that of all of the projects at that sort of scale, it's the only one that has informal governance. There are other open source projects that have informal governance. They are a lot smaller than Bitcoin. Okay. And Bitcoin is also underfunded. So I can't remember exactly what the statistics were from Ella's paper on this, but I think it was something like $8 million that they got in a year or something. It was just compared to the altcoins and the meme coins and stuff. Bitcoin's funding is pretty abysmal, and so they have to rely on grants and VC funding and other things that I think it could be reasonably argued distort their incentives and how they view and look at Bitcoin compared to everyone else. And I think if you can look at the statements of some maintainers and say that. But to answer your question more directly, a BIP is basically just a pull request, and there's this process to get people who are like defined contributors to agree or disagree on BIPs, and then the maintainers have basically a gentleman's agreement with the contributors to go along with whatever the contributors say. And it's like all very informal, and it like happens over IRC chat and in mailing lists, and there's nothing really enforcing anything. It's just people just agreeing. And that would be nice if people could just agree, but I think Knots and Core version 30 are showing that people can't just agree, and so we need to have a more resilient system. Does that answer your question?
no, it does. And again, for a lot of people who are getting into this space, it is kind of confusing on how everything on that level works. How does that look different in your implementation, Bitcoin Commons?
Yeah, so I think there's a number of different things that I do, but the main thing is a multi-sig merge and version signature verification. So if you want to merge something into the code base, you need more than one person to agree to press the button, and that when the releases are made, like when a new version is released, then that release is signed and encoded in such a way that it is evident that it went through this multi-sig merge process, and that there was a consensus of developers in merging the change. That way you can't just have one person having this merge access. So essentially, it's applying the principles of distributed trust minimization to the governance layer, to the development layer. So I'm applying the principles of Bitcoin to Bitcoin.
Makes sense.
What were, and I know who they were, but I kind of want to talk through again. When I first met you, you had a field of knowledge in a bunch of different areas, and I was just fascinated to hear you talk about all these different topics. The economic side of it, you and I were very in tuned on, but the psychological and all the other fields that we initially just were kind of talked about for hours that night on. What were the three main contributors or thinkers that kind of played a role in trying to create this more or less decentralized implementation?
Well, the three ones that I cite in the white paper and in the book the most are Hayek, Bitcoin, and that you could say that's Nakamoto, but there were a number of people who I think were pivotal in deciding the principles of Bitcoin. And then Eleanor Ostrom, and she had a husband, Vincent, who both worked on commons governance. And essentially the main thrust of my thesis is that Bitcoin's code base is a commons and it belongs to everybody. And so it should be treated as a commons. The problem with the commons is that you have the tragedy of the commons, and anytime you have a commons, it is invariably ruined by virtue of the fact that it's a commons. Eleanor Ostrom, in her research, proved that you could have a stable commons that functioned without chaos or hierarchy. And I think that, that was the best, that of all the things that I could point to, that was the best work. And she essentially proved that that was possible. So I just applied those principles to Bitcoin and the development layer and tried to do so consistently. That's all it really is about.
Yeah, it's
so.
Go ahead.
So I'll give you an example. So graduated sanctions, for example, if you break up the architecture of Bitcoin, instead of having one giant monolith of code, you break it up into little bits and pieces, then you can actually compose your own Bitcoin stack. And you may agree with, my version of consensus, but you don't agree with my reference node, or you don't agree with my governance app, or you don't agree with this, that, or the other thing. You should be able to pick and choose which things that you agree with in composing your stack. And then you can actually govern each of those things separately. And then by doing that, you introduce stability into the market. And I'm not saying to people that they need to come over to Commons and then just run my node and I'll suddenly now be the king of Bitcoin. That is not what I'm saying. I am measuring the health of the Commons ecosystem by the number of forks of the actual implementation that people use. So if you split up the architecture and then people introduce their opinions and we can have like a plurality of different options, then that to me is a healthy ecosystem. That's what we should strive towards. I'm trying to eliminate my opinion from the process. What I think about consensus or what should or shouldn't happen with Bitcoin should be irrelevant. And with the common system, it takes power and it makes it diffuse. So everyone has to agree. And there isn't a king of Bitcoin who gets to decide, essentially.
Yeah, I think it's very important in that fact. Again, I am very biased towards Hayek's thoughts on this and the Austrian perspective on this. And at the end of the day, the consumer is the most important individual in each free market. And you are kind of catering towards, again, right now, the consumers more or less who are the node operators only really have two options. Now, what people believe on that is their own thoughts. And so again, implementing what I believe could potentially play out to ultimately a third rail option that other people can build on as well, potentially, is something that Bitcoin desperately needs. Again, it was really thought provoking when you kind of laid it out. It's like core and knots right now, 99% are thinking 99% of what they believe in, what the consensus is on their thoughts is the same. There is a very, very small margin that is different. So again, at the end of the day,
it's not so much that the consensus is the same. It's also that the entire code base is the same.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, you can't, like, the core v knots is a false dichotomy. They're basically the same thing, essentially. And one of the nice things about Commons is that it is the least like core as anything could be. And there are other options out there. There's libbitcoin. There was, I think Mike Hearn tried to develop something, and No. There was an implementation in Go, and I can't remember the name of it. I'm so sorry. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. But the fact that it's similar to Bitcoin means that it's going to be downstream from Bitcoin. So Luke is still relying on Bitcoin. And the real question is, if Luke and his contingent of knots node runners manage to become the majority of node runners, and I'm not even saying that should or shouldn't happen, but if it does happen, then how are all the core people going to feel about working for Luke? Probably not very good, you know. So like there's some real questions here about like having code similarity to core and what that means. So, and I think also because it's a monolith, like I was saying, it's brittle and it's hard to change. So if you were to say re-implement Bitcoin using modern 2025 methodology, then it would be modular and it would have different layers and you could fork each one of those individual layers and everybody could play nice or nicer. So anyway, that's what I'm working on.
Yeah, I think the last question I have, and this is more or less enabling me to learn more on the topic. How exactly explain the merge access part there and kind of how that currently is working for core itself. Again, how they have access to it, and by they, it sounds like from what we were talking about offline, it's a select few that have merge access. Can you kind of explain that through and through?
Well, right. I mean, if you go on GitHub and you create a project on GitHub, then you can push code to that project, and someone can fork your code and make a change, and then they can make a request back to you to include their change into your code. And so you would then have to press that merge button to include their change. So you have direct authority over what goes into your code base, right? And essentially, it's a foil because there are some other things at play aside from that. But essentially, I think that power of what this goes into the code base should be decided by multiple people, and it shouldn't be optional to get agreement from multiple people to merge anything into Bitcoin. Because Bitcoin is a $2 trillion asset. One day it might be a $20 trillion asset or a $50 trillion asset. And one guy has a button where they can press to merge things into it. Like, so, it just doesn't add up in my mind.
Yeah, it almost feels like there's an Achilles heel to this thing that.
Well, fortunately, it's open source software, and the technical consensus layer is fine. And again, I'm not trying to advocate for any particular change to Bitcoin's technical consensus, and I'm in fact going out of my way to prove consensus and not change consensus, because I know that is catastrophe.
Yeah.
Right. It's either Bitcoin or bust.
Yeah.
So
you want to speak a little bit to that, the Bitcoin and bust, just to kind of wrap it out? How do you see, it kind of playing out in the future?
Well, that's a good question. I see the banks right around the corner with CBDCs and stable coins and tokens and all sorts of stuff, which essentially is fiat version 2.0.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that we already have CBDCs. We'll see.
Right.
Yeah, it's just going to be more controlled.
Exactly. Right. And so, but exactly. But my position is effectively with respect to this debate is that the properties of Bitcoin that average Bitcoiners should like to see emphasized in Bitcoin, like better self-custody and better privacy and all sorts of stuff, that is not going to happen because of the governance paralysis. And then what that does is it not only is humiliating to the Bitcoiner community because we're looked at like foolishly, like fools for, infighting about Corby knots, and people are like, oh, these Bitcoiners can't figure anything out,
Yeah.
And then meanwhile, the banks they could onboard, the whole planet into their CBD system in 6 months if they wanted. Meanwhile, Bitcoin can't figure out medium of exchange. And I think, again, there are a lot of things that could be done in Bitcoin, technologically speaking, that would help those properties like medium of exchange and other properties of Bitcoin that we should all want. And if we don't do it, if we don't do something about it, then eventually over time, Bitcoin will become sort of this ancient, brittle behemoth that nobody can change, and we get increasingly angry about, and when nobody can figure out why, So, I personally would like to see a resolution to it without all the drama and the stress. And unfortunately, there's been a lot of great talent wasted on shitcoins over the last 15 years. And a lot of probably talented engineers and good people get caught up in that. And to my mind, there's no second best. It's either Bitcoin or
slavery.
It's nothing. Right.
Yeah, nobody has been able to, and nor will anybody be able to ultimately replicate the decentralized consensus of Bitcoin. So, yeah,
right.
It's
switching gears a little bit now. Other than obviously, life-changing wealth, what else has Bitcoin done for your life that's been positive and a massive change?
Oh, yeah. Well, so I went public and I immediately hooked up with hundreds of Bitcoiners. And the one nice thing about Bitcoiners, and I've been involved in a bunch of online communities in my life, and what I've found about Bitcoiners is they tend to, A, be really smart, B, be very discerning, like they can differentiate between truth and lies pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
And also, they're happier. And then, as they should be, because they tend to have money where everyone else doesn't. So,
or they've seen the Matrix and they're getting themselves out of it.
Right. Exactly. Which incidentally, if you wait long enough, turns into financial security.
Right. What's your best way to kind of approach the Orange Bull conversation with someone that's, I would say, call them Bitcoin curious?
Well, I think it depends a lot on the person's personality. I just try to plant seeds, and some people are followers and they need to be led more, and other people need to do it themselves and take the initiative. And either way is appropriate. Just try to have fun. I think that's the key. I think whoever has the most fun wins. And yeah.
Yeah, going from 0 to 100, when a lot of people, including myself, not that too long ago, did not understand the fundamental apparatus of the monetary system I was living in. So attempting to explain this entirely different monetary system that operates over here, when the individuals don't know the issues and the downfalls of the one they currently live under. Obviously, it's going to be a tough sledding for that
right
route.
And what they do know is their dollar isn't going as far, and they're not able to get as many groceries. Their kids are a little hungrier, people are a little angrier. They can't go to the movies as often. They get it.
Yeah.
Like on some level, I think a lot of people understand. They just haven't had it articulated to them, and they certainly haven't had a solution articulated to them. And it's difficult to get over your biases too, because in my story, I didn't return to Bitcoin until my life fell apart, which essentially has to do with my negativity bias. And like, either for a long time, a lot of people will stay out of Bitcoin because they think there's nothing good in the world.
Yeah.
Everything is a scam. So therefore, Bitcoin must also be a scam, right?
I would
And
say
I
that's a
fell into
result
that.
of fiat just giving you that nihilistic, perspective on the world.
Exactly. And then also, but it can get you the other way too, which is to say, okay, well, maybe everything is a scam and Bitcoin isn't a scam, but because everything is a scam, there's no way they'll let Bitcoin survive, So
Yeah.
it like gets you one way or the other, you know.
Yeah, when someone says
But
that, they first of all don't understand anything about money, and they also don't understand anything about computers. And
right. Well,
yeah,
and the Bitcoin's inherent value is that it is not confiscatable, it's not censorable, and that those properties of Bitcoin, those principles that we love about it, are actually engineering constraints.
yeah,
And essentially, my whole position is that we can continue down this path of building technology that has these same engineering constraints. And then in doing so, maximize freedom and actually make Bitcoin itself a lot more secure and resistant to capture.
yeah.
So that's a whole separate thing.
Josh, it's been a fantastic conversation. I really enjoyed getting to know you and hearing your story. It's
Thanks.
incredibly inspiring. I think if we're going to round it out to give financial advice, which we like to do, the only financial advice we give is study Bitcoin. But I mean, you were the ultimate hodler. 13 years. Don't touch your Bitcoin, and wake up and your life has changed.
Yeah, well, it was actually almost 14 years to the day that I put the Bitcoin on the drive that I
Really,
recovered.
14
Hmm.
years. I
Yeah,
think,
I found it 13 years and then sat on it for a little while, but you know that part.
yeah, that's awesome. Justin, you got anything?
Nope, just hard assets and an inflationary monetary system. It pays to play the dead man portfolio. Don't touch it.
That's it.
There you go.
Appreciate it,
All right,
buddy.
guys.
Take
Thank you
care.
so much. It was a pleasure to be with you.